What's up guys? Welcome back to the channel Hand Waving. Your friend Naruto Addict 3.0 is here again with a brand new Naruto fanfic that's going to change everything. A story where Naruto is betrayed and banished. But destiny has bigger plans for him. From exile to emperor, this is the journey of power, strategy, and love. Today's fanfic is titled, What If Naruto Fell in Love with Ino and Kiss Part 1. The death of a clan. Ino Yamanaka, a beautiful blonde girl the age of 10, was in class. She, like many others, fawned over Sasuke because of his great looks and dark, brooding, emo attitude. He rarely talked, and that alone made him mysterious. He never paid attention to any of the girls, he just ignored them, and if on occasion he would pay attention, it would be an insult. Ino found it alluring that he continued to attend the academy even after the murder of his entire clan, the Uchiha. Ino sat behind him, staring at the back of his head. Naruto, leave me alone, she heard the fabled, billboard brow, yell. But Sakura, I haven't even entered the classroom yet, he said with a frown. All he did was open the door and she flipped at him. I don't care, just stay away from me, she yelled, and he sighed, giving a downcast look. Okay then Sakura, he said, and he sat in the top left corner of the class. Naruto was attractive too. Actually, he was easily as attractive as Sasuke, if not hotter. The problem was, well, him. Ino didn't know how to put it. Naruto was very vibrant and happy, and that could be overwhelming, but she didn't have anything against the boy. She found his positive attitude refreshing. It was just that everybody seemed to hate Naruto and she herself just wanted to blend in. The boy had a shaggy blonde spiky hair with cerulean blue pools for eyes. He had 3 whisker marks on each of his cheeks and she thought they were cute. One problem that, if she had ever hung out with him she would fix herself, was his clothing. He insisted on wearing bright orange. While she had no problem with the color itself, she had worn an orange shirt a lot of her younger life, she just thought he wore way too much. He was always wearing a bright orange shirt with the Konoha emblem on the back and orange shorts. He had on an orange short sleeve jacket with blue sleeves, and even then that little amount of blue was refreshing. His outfit was completely horrid. They turned their attention to the teacher as he walked in. Okay class, today we will be talking about the 4th Hokage. Who can tell me his real name? Naruto raised his hand with an eager smile. Naruto, the teacher said, and Naruto responded eagerly. Minato Namikaze, he yelled, and the teacher nodded with a smile. Iruka-sensei was one of the only people that didn't treat Naruto like trash. Can you name some of his achievements? Naruto nodded hastily. He graduated at the academy, early at the age we are now, getting to Chunin at 11, and getting to Jonin at 12. He was in the Anbu until he was in his late 20s, this was when he was selected by Lord Third and put in place as the 4th. Iruka nodded again. Very good Naruto, though I am curious how you know that. A lot of people don't even know his real name. Naruto shrugged. I read up on the Oesamest Hokage because I have to surpass him. Iruka grinned, he knew of Naruto's goal. His lecture continued for an hour and a half before they went out for some light sparring and shuriken practice. Naruto was terrible at throwing shuriken, but he exceeded almost everyone in the class at taijutsu. He was only matched by Sasuke, and even then it was pretty one-sided. Ino was number 2 when it came to taijutsu with the girls, her facing off against Hinata for the number 1 spot. Hinata was really good when it came to taijutsu. After that they went to lunch before finishing their lecture. Ino was one of the kids that walked home by herself as her dad worked at the interrogation place and her mother was usually busy at home. Ino wrinkled her nose as the smell of fire hit her nose. The sky began to go dark, covered by ash and smoke. She took off in a sprint as she spotted her compound. It was her compound up in flames. Mom! She yelled, and she charged into a flaming building. Her eyes widened when she found her mother dead, lying in a pool of her own blood. Mom! Ino screamed, and her father hit the floor from behind the wall, his head rolling along the ground. Her eyes widened. Daddy, she muttered questioningly, falling to her knees. Another one. Perfect. Ino's eyes got even wider and fear grasped her heart as a man stepped out from behind the wall, a katana in his hand, dripping with blood. Lord Orochimaru might want one, I wonder if I should take her. He said, but she didn't hear him. There was a loud ringing in her ears. The man shrugged and raised his sword, preparing to end the girl's life. He brought it down, but he connected with nothing. He frowned and looked around. The door hung off its hinges and a bit of blood laid on the ground where she was before. He shrugged, not caring. He had already completed his task, destroy the Yamanaka clan. Even with that little girl, there was no recovering from what had just happened. There were hundreds of dead Yamanakas all over the compound. The man then left. Ino. Wh. She asked out loud. She was floating, and flying very fast at that matter. She looked up and her eyes widened. It was Naruto, a serious look on his face, a large cut on his cheek. Naruto. Naruto looked down and nodded. Yeah, it's me. I smelt fire and I came running. I grabbed you before he got you. He said, and she nodded slowly. Are you okay? She asked and he nodded. What about you? I mean, I never had any family, but I know it has to hurt to have them taken away like that. He muttered and he gave her sad eyes. Naruto, where are you taking me? He smiled at her. I was taking you to the old man, Hokage-sama. Ino nodded and subconsciously leaned into his chest. The mental rapage she had just experienced had made her exhausted. She closed her eyes and drifted off to sleep. Ino awoke in a room with yellow walls and not that impressive. The bed smelled nice and it was comfortable. An orange blanket was around her and the sheet was white. The pillowcases were orange while the pillows themselves were white. She looked around the room. It was pretty boring. It was clean and that showed that the room lacked what a room should have, stuff. She got out of the bed and walked out of the room slowly, taking into account that she was wearing the same clothes that she had fallen asleep with. She looked out of the doorway and her eyes widened. Naruto slept peacefully on the couch. The room was covered in his stuff, outfits and scrolls. Naruto himself was shirtless with a pair of black night shorts on. Naruto? She asked aloud. He opened his eyes immediately and sat up. What's up? He asked, ignoring how tired he himself was. He had a bandage on his face and it hid the cut he received earlier. Are we in your house? Naruto shrugged. Well, I guess you could call it that now. I mean, I just moved in today, but technically it's our house. He said and she frowned. Naruto nodded. Yeah, the Hokage insisted that you stay with me while they repaired your house and he provided me with the keys to my mom's old house, I guess. Naruto said. He refused to tell me anything about her or my dad, but he is letting me stay here. Strange. What about my family? Naruto expected this question, but it made his breathing hitch. I'm sorry, Ino, you're the last Yamanaka. Her eyes widened and tears began to fall down her face. No, she whispered. She wanted to give up. Hey, it's gonna be alright. Naruto said, and he was about to wrap her in a hug, but she pushed him away and ran into the room, slamming the door and locking it. He shrugged and laid down on the couch again. Good night, he said. He didn't hear anything but silent sobbing in the house. Naruto looked at the clock and he frowned. It was 3 a.m. Man, he muttered and he forcefully pulled himself up, going to search the kitchen. To his surprise, everything was covered in preservation seals and there was plenty of food in there. He took out a package of meat and cheese, grabbing some bread and making himself an improvised sandwich. He made a pot of coffee. I'm 10, I shouldn't be drinking this crap, Naruto said, sipping at his coffee. He watched some TV quietly. Yo, Ino, I dunno if you are going, but it's time for school, so I'm gonna head out. He heard a muffled K. Naruto left for school in his normal school outfit. He made it to the class and to his surprise, everyone was talking about the extermination of the Yamanaka clan. Naruto sneered. Will you shut up? He yelled at all of them, getting surprised looks. What? Sakura asked him as if he had grown a second head. Do you really think Ino would want this to be the conversation in the school? Come on. Look at Sasuke. He used to talk to people. How do you think Ino feels right now? Quote. He yelled and they looked down with ashamed looks. Looks like you have someone to talk to, Tem. Naruto said, and he sat in his usual spot. He noticed that some people stayed a little further away from Sasuke after he said this and the door opened. Huh, it was Ino with a fake smile on her face. It was obviously fake though. You didn't need to come today, Ino, Sakura said, patting her friend on the back and pulling her into a hug. It's okay, Sakura. It happens, loss is a part of being a ninja, she said, and Sasuke realized she was right, but he still desired revenge against his brother. Okay, Sakura said, and she returned to her seat. Ino had to ask the Hokage about getting more clothes. Ino went up to the corner next to Naruto, surprising even him. He grinned at her and she sighed. Yo, I figured that since the old man gave me some of my inheritance, I would take you shopping or give you money for shopping yourself. He whispered to her so that nobody else could hear. This was her opportunity. Okay, Naruto, but you are getting new clothes as well. Naruto nodded. I was thinking maybe a deep red, he said, and she shook her head. Then again, they really didn't know what color he looked good with. No, you need to chill with the bright colors. If you are going to be a ninja, then you have to dress like one. Orange doesn't help during missions, you need more black. Naruto nodded. I understand, the only problem with that is that I'm not allowed in other shops. Naruto muttered, and she frowned. Why not? He looked at his stomach and sighed, shrugging. I dunno. She didn't buy it, but she relented, paying attention as Iruka began speaking. 2 weeks later, Naruto looked in the mirror. Ino and himself had finally found a store that would sell him clothing, and even though they were a bit more costly, Naruto had been given a bit of inheritance so he could afford it easily. He was rather pleased with his new look. He wore a white open jacket like a hoodie, and it had the Konoha swirl on the back. Under that was a deep red shirt with a horizontal black line in the abdomen area going around the shirt. His pants were just a pair of black ninja pants, and he wore black ninja sandals. Ino had let him wear the deep red because it looked nice on him. Naruto walked out with a grin on his face and his hands behind his head. Naruto heard. Naruto. It was Sakura. Oh god, Naruto thought. He used to like Sakura, like 2 weeks ago, but being around Ino, who was just as pretty, plus she wasn't a total bitch, kinda made him hate being around Sakura. What? He asked, and she narrowed her eyes. Are you trying to be cool like Sasuke? Naruto shook his head. Tem doesn't have anything on me. Ino punched him on top of his head. Shut up, she yelled, and Sakura snickered. So Ino, you're hanging around Naruto now. I thought you went for the dark brooding type. Ino frowned visibly. I do. Naruto spoke up. Geez, Sakura, you really think she would go out with me? Yeah, you must have bumped your big forehead or something, because that would never happen, he said, and he grinned at Sakura's enraged look. You idiot, she yelled, and she punched at him. Naruto took a step back and the punch hit air. Yeah, that's not happening, he said, and he turned to walk away, leaving a stunned Ino. He had just berated himself for her benefit. Hey Baka, wait up, she yelled, and he stopped as she ran after him. We can't exactly just end the day here. How about we go grab something to eat? I hear you like ramen. Naruto grinned ear to ear. You heard incorrectly, Ino. She frowned. I love it, she growled and bonked him on the head. BTU gave a heartwarming smile. Well then, let's go. He nodded, and they made their way to his favorite ramen stand. Miso please, he yelled, and Ino tapped her chin. I'll have the same, she said calmly. Oh, you brought a girl, Naruto, Ayame said, teasing Naruto, and he just shrugged. Actually, it was more like she brought me, he said, and Ayame giggled. How many bowls, Naruto? Tsuki asked, and Naruto tapped his chin. I think 8 should satisfy. His stomach grumbled. Make that 10. Tsuki nodded. 10 bowls of ramen. No offense, but do you realize how unhealthy that is, Naruto? Ino asked, and Naruto frowned. Unhealthy? Ino nodded. If this is how you eat, it's no wonder you're so short. Naruto laughed sheepishly but then frowned. I'm not short, he yelled, and she grinned. Oh yeah, shorty, he growled and turned, devouring his bowls. I'm getting you on a diet, Naruto, she said, and he ignored her. She ate hers as well. They left after that, and unknown to them, they were being watched by a certain pale-eyed girl. Well, unknown to Ino, Naruto knew that she watched him frequently. He wasn't sure if she liked him, admired him, obsessed over him, or was trying to get the jump on him, but he didn't really mind her watching. Hinata's eyes widened when she watched them enter the same apartment. No way, she said to herself, and she activated her clan bloodline. It's like they live together, she said, and she turned. No way, she muttered, were they really together? She turned back and saw Ino in the bedroom, but Naruto was topless on the couch. Maybe not, it's getting late, I should get home. She turned and returned to her home. She would look into it more soon. The next day they left for class. Naruto sat in his usual secluded spot and Ino took hers next to him. They were slowly but surely becoming good friends. Ino would occasionally catch Sasuke staring at her, and even though she thought that she was madly in love with the brooding boy, she felt more when Naruto gave her the time of day. She was still broken up about her family, but Naruto was slowly beginning to fill that gap, and not as family but as something completely different. It was like she was wandering through darkness and he was a pillar of light. She had also noticed that Naruto was much stronger than he let on. Maybe not as strong as her precious Sasuke, but strong nonetheless. It was like he was purposefully getting dead last in the academy. Naruto laid his head on the desk next to her and fell asleep. It's Naruto and Ino, Sakura yelled, and Ino's eyes widened. I heard she was dating the loser. Sakura yelled and Ino growled at her. I guess that she had to rebound somehow with the death of her clan. Sakura said coldly, and the class went quiet. Sakura was thrown to the ground by nothing, or what looked like nothing, but Naruto was practically leaking killer intent and she felt her face flush red. She couldn't breathe. Shut your mouth, Naruto said, and the pressure died down. She took a deep breath and stared at Naruto like he had grown a second head. Why you? Sasuke spoke up. Sakura. She turned to him in hope that he had come to her defense, but he had a glare of his own. Don't go spouting nonsense that you know nothing about, shut up, he said, and he turned to the front of the classroom, a blank look in his eyes. Sasuke? Sakura asked, and the door opened, letting Iruka in. Iruka looked at the state of the now crying Pinkett. What happened to Haruno? Iruka asked, and Naruto shrugged. Fortunately for him, nobody really cared. Sasuke told her to shut up. Ino spoke up and he looked at Sakura in disbelief. That turned her into this. Geez. Sakura, take your seat, he said, and she sat in a secluded seat toward the door. Today we will be talking about 2-week time skip. Naruto walked out of the Hokage's office with a frown. He heard that Ino wouldn't be able to return home for a while. Not that he minded, he rather enjoyed her company, but she didn't seem to like it. Yo Ino, he yelled when he spotted her on her way into his apartment, but she didn't hear him. He began to run, but he crashed into someone. Oh, sorry old man, Asuma, Naruto yelled, and Asuma chuckled. No problem Naruto, don't let me stop you from going, he said, and Naruto rushed past him. Ino, Naruto yelled as he entered his apartment. She turned to him. Huh, what's up? She asked, and he grinned sheepishly. You wanna go out with me? She frowned. She felt her heart speed up and a small blush came to her cheeks. Everything was telling her to accept his offer, but she rolled her eyes. No, he sighed. At least she didn't hit him like Sakura did. Oh well, I'll do better next time, he yelled, and he pumped his fist chillishly. Sure, she said. He ran to his stuff. I'm gonna go train for a while. Ino smirked at him. Oh really? You think that will stop me from calling you Baka? He nodded with a grin. Count on it. She shook her head. Never gonna happen, Blondie. He frowned and raised an eyebrow. You're blonde too. She shook her head. Not like that though. Naruto grinned and left, leaving Ino to herself. She leaned against the wall with a hand on her chest and a heavy blush on her face. She slid down. Did he just ask me out? She asked herself, and she had to fight back the urge to run after him. You Baka, she whispered. Naruto. Naruto feverishly tried to do the clone jutsu but failed miserably every time. Come on, I only have a week left to do this, Naruto yelled, and he attempted again. Oh, just my luck. Naruto frowned as he recognized the voice. Mizuki-sensei? Naruto asked, turning toward the white-haired Chunin who was dressed in his combat uniform with two large shuriken on his back. What are you doing here? Naruto asked and Mizuki grinned. I was about to leave but I figured that you would like to know some crucial information. At the same time Naruto growled. He already knew what Mizuki was going to tell him. So what? Naruto finished for him. It's just a dumb fox. Naruto said, not letting Mizuki tell him. Oh, you already know. Well, I have news for you. You are the nine-tailed fox, not just a container. Naruto looked down, his hair shadowing his eyes. Now die you demon. Mizuki yelled and he hurled the shuriken at Naruto. Naruto was unable to move and the shuriken impaled him in the chest, making him fall onto his back with blood pouring from his mouth and chest. What? Naruto couldn't form a single thought. Well, I was kind of hoping that the demon brat would have more fight in him but whatever. He said and he turned to flee. He still had the scroll. Oh, he muttered as a platinum blonde girl made her way into the clearing with tears in her eyes. Ino? He asked and she propped his head up on her lap, ignoring the blood staining her clothing. Damn it Naruto, I just help you get that shirt, she muttered. Why yeah, sorry about that, he muttered and his eyes slowly closed. No, Naruto, she yelled and she shook him, his hand lifelessly fell to the side. Naruto, she screamed and he didn't move. No, please, you were supposed to be there for me after the death of my clan. She muttered and she began to cry freely. So the demon had friends? Mizuki asked her, turning back around. Her breathing hitched as she looked at him. He smirked. Assuming you heard what I told him. So why weep for him, knowing that he is a demon? Ino growled at him. Because he wasn't a demon. He was my friend. Mizuki sneered. You little bitch. You should have been exterminated with your clan. Mizuki said and he pulled the kunai off of his back. He threw it at Ino and she covered herself with her arms, closing her eyes. The shuriken never struck. Naruto had caught it, standing in front of Ino. His hair shadowed his eyes. Don't you touch her bastard. He yelled and he blasted at Mizuki. Mizuki was a trained Chunin so he wasn't about to be caught off guard by the demon brat. He dodged a well-placed punch by stepping to the side and he went to kick Naruto in the back but he had disappeared. Mizuki's eyes almost bulged out of his head and he coughed up blood as Naruto planted his knee into the Chunin's gut, sending him rolling back, clutching his broken ribs. Why you demon? Mizuki yelled and Naruto scowled at him, revealing his eyes. They were still their soft cerulean but the pupils were slits. Mizuki stood and pulled out a kunai with a bomb tag on it. He grinned and threw it at Ino. Ino's eyes widened and she once again put up her arms but she never felt anything besides the gust of air from the explosion. She opened her eyes, she got a flashback. Naruto was carrying her bridal style on top of a high branch in a tree. He set her down. Go alert the Anbu, I'll stall him. Naruto whispered, leaving no room for argument. She nodded and left with a small blush on her cheeks. Naruto returned to the clearing, throwing a roundhouse that Mizuki raised his forearm to block. Naruto was pushed back by a show of strength from Mizuki and he was kicked in the chest, flying back, landing on his stomach. Naruto stood up and grabbed a shuriken that was planted in the ground next to him, spinning it in his hand and jumping at Mizuki. Mizuki pulled out a kunai and blocked the swing from the enraged Naruto before punching just under his wrist, making him lose his grip on the shuriken. Mizuki kicked Naruto in the face before kneeing him in the gut and grabbing him, throwing him into a tree. Naruto groaned in pain. He stood up and got back in a battle position. Mizuki threw the shuriken at him and Naruto jumped out of the way, wincing as it grazed his forearm. Naruto grabbed a kunai from the ground and stabbed a Mizuki who was a little surprised by his show of aggressiveness. Naruto managed to lodge the kunai in the man's shoulder but Mizuki basically just shrugged it off and grabbed Naruto by the face, proceeding to repeatedly slam his head into the ground. Mizuki continued even after the boy was unconscious. Blood flying from the boy's head. Mizuki was then decapitated by the sword of an Anbu with Ino behind him. Take him to the hospital. The Anbu said to another one and the Anbu complied. Hokage-sama, what do we do? The Hokage sighed, taking a puff from his pipe. Nothing. Await Naruto's recovery. Said boy was now in a hospital bed, on life support, his heart barely active. Naruto winced in his sleep. Ino stared at him from his bedside. Why? She asked out loud. Naruto had saved her 3 times now. Unknown place. Damn that hurt, Naruto muttered as he clung to the wall of a large sewer. What the hell? He muttered. In front of him was a massive cage with silent, massive, red eyes staring him down. He grinned. Yo, he said with a small wave, but he then winced at the pain in his side. Yo, I figured that you would already know who I am. Naruto's grin widened. I do, but I just don't care. I feel like this relationship would be better it was built on positivity and kindness. Besides, you haven't tried to attack me yet. The fox shook its head with a large foxy grin. I like that perspective, brat, but I am made of hatred. Naruto shook his head. I don't believe that. I've done my homework. You were said to be created by the Sage of Six Paths himself, right? He is the god of ninja, the original. In that case, he couldn't have been a bad guy. The fox grunted. Your point. Naruto put his hands behind his head and the area slowly began to change. The ground turned white before blades of grass covered the ground with an occasional flower. The area turned bright yellow for a moment before it was replaced by a beautiful sunset that was set over a massive gorgeous lake and waterfall. The fox was still restrained by a leash that was strapped to a wooden post. The post read, Seal. My point is that he wouldn't have created a being of hatred. You are just misunderstood. I have some theories on the incident anyway. The fox frowned. Theories? Naruto nodded. I think that you were controlled. I was reading about the fight between the first Hokage and Madara Uchiha. If he could control you, who's to say that only he can? I think the Uchiha were plotting. Naruto said, and the fox visibly scowled. You would be correct in that regard, brat. I was controlled. In fact, it was an Uchiha. I think it was Madara again, but I couldn't be too sure. Naruto nodded. Well, either way the villagers still hate us for what you did, whether you were in control or not. The fox nodded solemnly. But hey, now that I've talked to you, we can make a deal or something where I can access your chakra, right? The fox shook its head. It's not that simple, brat. We would have to merge our chakra, and that would be excruciatingly painful. Naruto grinned. Do it, he said with no hesitation. The large fox seemed to contemplate. Fine, he said, and Naruto grinned. How do we do it? Naruto asked, and the fox gestured to the seal. Just tear off some of the seal and I'll do the rest. Naruto walked over to the seal and looked at it for a moment. The fox seemed to be trustworthy. Done, Naruto said, and he tore off a quarter of the seal. The fox's eyes widened. I could have been lying to you, brat. Naruto shrugged. I felt like I could trust you. The fox nodded. Come here. Naruto walked over to him and the fox placed its paw in front of Naruto, its claw raising. He then impaled Naruto, whose eyes widened, rolled back into his head. Oh ouch, he muttered, and Kyuubi began to channel chakra. Naruto began to scream in pain. This was going to suck. The days before graduation, Ino screamed as she sat up. Daddy, she muttered, and she hugged her knees to her chest. She was covered in a cold sweat. She wept silently. The house was empty and Ino was alone. She heard a door open and her eyes widened. You okay? Naruto asked. He was back, but when did he get back? Why did he look so different? Naruto was a couple inches taller than her, just as tall as Sasuke. He wore the standard white shirt of the hospital and it clung to his body, revealing extreme muscle mass, a full six-pack and large chest. His bottom was covered by a pair of gray night shorts. Naruto, when'd you get back? She asked, and Naruto shrugged. An hour ago. Are you okay? I heard you scream, Naruto said, and he sat on the edge of the bed. He gave her concerned eyes. Naruto, I miss them. She muttered and she began to cry. I miss them so much. I miss mom. I miss daddy. I miss uncle. I miss auntie. I miss my nephews and nieces. I miss my entire clan. Naruto nodded and he laid back, his head between her feet. I can't tell you it will be okay, Ino. That's where I messed up last time. If I'm honest, I'm not sure I would recover from that. Naruto looked deep into her eyes. But one thing I can tell you, is that I'm here for you. Tell me if you need help, I'll be there in a flash. Naruto grinned as her eyes widened. Thank you, Naruto, she sobbed out and he nodded. I can't really relate. I never had any family in the first place. Having them and losing them is different though. It's like being given a gift and having it taken away just when you get to the best part. Naruto said, I could never relate to something like that. I would rather have my own, lonely childhood, than to have my happiness stripped away like that. He sat up and turned to her. I want you to be okay, Ino. I really do. You're my new best friend. Over these last 4.5 weeks, I discovered that family is possible, even without relatives. These last 4 weeks have been the best 4 weeks in my life. Ino pulled him into a hug. Sorry, Naruto, I have been a little harsh on you, she muttered into his ear and he smiled, not bothering to hug her back, just letting her hug him. No problem, I'm sure I would be too. He said and he grinned. Now, we should get to bed, I want to go get some new clothes tomorrow, my outfit was in tatters, unsalvageable. He said and he began to get up but she pulled him back down. Can you sleep in here tonight? He nodded with a small smile on his face. Of course, Ino, he said and he rolled off the side of the bed, onto the floor. Now let's get to bed, I'm tired. Naruto said and Ino nodded to herself. Okay. Naruto slowly closed his eyes and he let himself drift off to sleep. Ino grabbed her blanket and slipped onto the floor next to him, curling up to his side and drifting off to sleep as well. Naruto was unresponsive. Next morning, Naruto woke up with a groan. Why was he so heavy? His back ached as if something was pressing him into the floor. Ino was asleep with half over her body on top of him, her hand wrapped around him like a teddy bear and her legs intertwined with his own. His eyes widened when he realized the situation. Oh, he muttered and he tried as hard as he could to get away. Managing to get away, he tiptoed out of the room and Ino opened her eyes with a smile. Baka, she muttered and she sat up. Naruto was out cooking something for breakfast already. She walked out and the scent of eggs wafted up her nose. She was glad she had showed him how to make things and season them. Naruto greeted her with a nervous wave. Hey, did you get taller? She asked and he nodded. Yeah, I guess I grew like 2 or 3 inches. He said and she grinned at him. I guess I can't call you shorty anymore. Naruto shook his head with a smirk. No you can't, shorty. Ino growled at him but smiled. So you want to go get clothes today, Blondie-kun? She asked and he blushed at the emphasis. Yeah, she smirked at his blush. I'm going with you, to make sure you don't get anything too horrid. Naruto growled at her. Yeah right, I'm going by myself. He yelled childishly and she grinned. Are you sure? He frowned for a moment. Fine, he said and she nodded, eating the breakfast he had prepared. She took in his features. Naruto seemed lighter, if that made sense. He seemed less heavy, like he carried himself better. His whisker marks were barely visible and you would have so squint hard to see them as they were basically non-existent. His eyes were a bit darker, taking on more of a navy blue than a cerulean. His hair seemed more like the mane of a lion, spikier and a bit longer. His goggles were around his forehead. Okay, let me get dressed and we can go. Ino said and she went to get dressed. He let out a sigh that he didn't know he was holding. Man, she is going to be the death of me. I wonder if Sakura recovered from the shock of being called forehead girl by me. He asked himself and suddenly there was a knock at the door. He went and opened it, revealing said Pinkett. Hey Naruto, I wanted to apologize about the other triple A. She trailed off when Ino emerged from behind a wall with her hair wet and a set of fresh clothing. Sakura felt her entire face turn red. Ino, she screamed and Naruto put his arm in front. Continue, he said and she slowly nodded. I'm apologizing for the other day. I was out of line, and I guess I can apologize to Ino as well. Ino walked up to Naruto's side. I'm sorry Ino, I was just mad that Naruto called me forehead. Ino grinned at her and pulled her into a hug. So I guess it's true then. You are dating Naruto. Ino turned red as did Naruto. No. Naruto yelled. She just lives with me because of what happened. He yelled and Sakura frowned. What happened? Oh, he must be talking about her clan being wiped out. Why Naruto though? She thought in confusion. The old Hokage-sama said that it would be a good idea for us to live together since I've never had a family and she lost hers. He said that we could sort of relate and it would be better than letting her live with the Tem. Sakura knew who he was talking about. So, the Hokage could have made her live with Sasuke. Naruto nodded. And he figured that it would be better for both of you to bunk together. Naruto nodded again. Although we don't share a bed, I sleep on the couch. It's easy to afford this place too, because it was my mom's apartment apparently and the rent is easy to afford with Ino's inheritance and mine. I thought you said you didn't have parents, Sakura said and Naruto shrugged. He refused to tell me anything about them and gave me the key to this place, also free access to her bank account. Sakura nodded. I also noticed that you look different Naruto, you're taller, I can barely see your whiskers, and your eyes are darker. Naruto shrugged. Growth spurt. She frowned. Why haven't either of you been at school for a couple days? Naruto grinned. I fought Mizuki Tem, he said and Sakura frowned. I was in the hospital for a couple days, Ino just decided to wait for my recovery before returning. I'm headed to get some new clothes, he said and Sakura nodded. Overall this was a lot of information to process. Could I come with you? I was going to go to Ino's today so I don't really have anything to do anymore. Naruto nodded with a small smile. Of course. Sakura smiled back. They all left for the building where Naruto could buy clothes. When they arrived something immediately caught Naruto's eye. He grabbed an orange jacket with black short sleeves. He then grabbed a couple pairs of ninja pants, a dark gray one and a black one. He then grabbed a handful of white, black, blue, green shirts. He walked into the dressing room and emerged soon after, his gray ones on with the jacket over the white tee. He left on his black sandals. How do I look? Naruto asked with a grin. The orange isn't bad on the eyes, I like it just as much as the first one. Ino said and Sakura nodded. Naruto purchased the outfit. He and the other two went out for food, talking. Naruto was reluctant to go to a certain restaurant and Ino knew why but Sakura was confused. They ended up at a barbecue place, eating with Shikamaru and Choji. Oh Naruto, you grew. Shikamaru said and Naruto nodded. Yeah, I hit a small growth spurt. Choji frowned. Small. That leaves you as tall as Sasuke at least. Naruto nodded. Yeah, but if you really think about it, Sasuke isn't the tallest guy either. Shikamaru nodded. So what are you doing hanging out with Sakura and Ino? Naruto shrugged. I dunno, I was going to hang out with Ino but Sakura tagged along, I don't mind. Sakura and Ino were lost in their own conversation about gossip and they kept glancing at Naruto. Naruto leaned back after her ate and sighed, closing his eyes, listening to the conversation going on around him. Brat. Someone is about to attack you. Naruto's eyes widened at the sound of the fox's voice. He looked around and he stood up, walking outside. Sasuke stood with a glare. What's up, Tem? Naruto asked and Sasuke growled at him. I can sense your chakra dobi, how are you so much stronger? Naruto frowned and rubbed the back of his head. Eating right. Sasuke pulled out a shuriken and threw it at Naruto. Naruto's eyes widened. He wasn't really combat trained so when the shuriken seemed to slow down drastically he just jumped to the side, letting it fly past him. Sasuke stuck his hands in his pockets. Never mind. Nobody that is combat trained would dodge like that. He turned and walked away. Naruto looked at the retreating form of Sasuke before speaking. Slowed down shuriken. What the hell Kyuubi? He heard chuckling from inside him. When you get faster, things that normally would have been impossible to see, slow down. You've gotten a lot faster. Naruto nodded and he turned to a confused Ino and Sakura. What happened? She asked him, looking at Sasuke's retreating form. He was curious if I was stronger since I grew. Ino shrugged and watched Sakura run after the Uchiha boy. Well, there she goes to spy on Sasuke. You training at all today? Naruto shrugged. I might run a couple laps and do some push-ups but that's it. Why, you wanna come? Ino nodded. Yeah, maybe I could give you some pointers. Naruto shook his head with a smirk and they made their way to a clearing that Naruto trained in. Ino took notice that the trees around were worn down like someone repeatedly struck them. Naruto peeled off his jacket and began to run around the clearing. Ino watched him with bored eyes. Maybe turn a jog into a sprint, Naruto. Naruto nodded and dust kicked up. He took off in a quick sprint that she could still keep up with. Come on, you can run faster than that, you aren't even sweating. Naruto disappeared from her field of vision, clouds of dust kicking up all around the area. Her eyes widened when he pulled to a stop, sweating slightly. He turned to her. Was that better? She nodded. I didn't know you were that fast, Naruto. He nodded. Yeah, now what? He asked and she tapped her chin. Maybe she could get him to take off her shirt and do sit-ups. Shirtless sit-ups. He peeled off his shirt, throwing it to the side. Her eyes widened at his body. He was ripped. Oh my, she muttered and he gave her a confused look. What? She shook her head quickly. Nothing, do the exercise. Naruto complied. This training went on for a while. They had been there for 3 hours, doing whatever Ino instructed him to do. They returned to their home after that, ready to eat and get ready for school the next day. They had the graduation exam in a couple days. Naruto took a much-needed shower, putting on his normal night shorts but staying shirtless, laying on the couch. It was the middle of summer so he really didn't need a blanket. Naruto closed his eyes. It was still early but he wanted a head start on the next day so he went to sleep. Ino followed suit, sleeping in the room, feeling safe with him in the other room. She closed her eyes and drifted off to sleep. Ino's dream. Ino ran from a man with a mask. The same man that destroyed her entire clan. She dodged a volley of shuriken by and she threw a kick at his incoming form but he caught her leg and slammed her into the floor. He then threw her away from him, weaving through hand seals. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. Ino's eyes widened and she covered herself with her arms, one thing on her mind, a name. Naruto, help me, please. There was a flash and the fireball was cancelled out. Ino looked out and saw Naruto's back. He looked over his shoulder and grinned at her. Her eyes widened and a blush filled her cheeks. Naruto, she whispered and the dream took a different turn. Ino found herself in a bed with purple blankets. She wasn't under them though, she was on top. Naruto entered the room with a grin and he sat next to her. She looked down at herself and she was almost. Her eyes widened and Naruto leaned in to kiss her, his chest bare and in boxers. Ino felt herself begin to lean in. Real world. Ino woke up with a gasp and sweat rolling down her body, her pajamas pretty wet from sweat and her panties soaked from the wet dream she had just had. It was light outside and the smell of breakfast hit her nose. She sat up quickly, embarrassed. She ran to the bathroom with a change of clothes and changed hastily, making sure to hide her panties at the bottom of her clothes. She walked out and greeted Naruto with a heavy blush and a, "Good morning. Hey, are you okay? You are extremely red, have you been hanging out with Hinata lately?" Ino had to suppress a laugh at his cluelessness. Anyway, are you already dressed? We have school in an hour. Ino nodded. Let's leave after we eat. Naruto shook his head. I'm gonna get a head start, I'm going early. Should I wear the black pants or the gray ones? She tapped her chin. Gray. Naruto nodded. What about shirts? Blue, green, black, gray, or orange? She frowned. White. Naruto frowned as well. I didn't say white. She shrugged. I did. He shrugged as well and grabbed his clothing, going into the bathroom. He changed and made his way out, scarfing the food down and leaving with a, "Bye." She waved at him as the door closed and she then facepalmed. I had a wet dream about Naruto, she muttered, horror spread across her face. I've never even had a wet dream about Sasuke. She slammed her head on the table. What the hell is wrong with me? She asked herself and she ate in silence, going to school after. Naruto was already in the back, seeming deep in thought. She frowned and took her spot next to him, or 2 seats down from him because 2 spots were filled by random girls. Oh Ino! He yelled and he scooted over 1 seat. Sit here, he said, patting the desk where he was previously. She got up and sat next to him, waiting for Iruka to come in. Naruto went back into his brain while Ino listened to girls gossip about Sasuke and talk bad about Naruto. She sighed and laid her head down. Yo Ino. She sat up. Huh. Naruto grinned at her. It's time for lunch, I brought some, you hungry? She looked around. It was in fact lunchtime, it seemed that she had fallen asleep. She smiled at Naruto. Yes please. Naruto nodded. Hey, you slept for a long time, did you sleep last night? He asked and she nodded. Yeah, I don't know why I'm so tired. He nodded. You wanna come with me to train again after school? Yesterday was a great workout. She shook her head. No, I think I'm gonna see if I can hang out with Shika and Choji. Naruto nodded with a grin. The rest of the day went by normally and Naruto vanished after school ended. Naruto. Naruto crossed his fingers. Shadow clone jutsu. He shouted. He channeled a lot of chakra into it and his eyes widened when literally thousands of solid copies of himself appeared. So, this is easy. Naruto muttered. I told you brat. Naruto nodded. So apparently whatever you guys do is passed on over to me, so basically just practice any chakra control exercises and I will take a group of you to do some taijutsu work. Well, not really taijutsu because I don't have a style yet, but I am going to increase my reaction time. He got an army of nods and he did exactly as he said he would do. After his training he made all of his clones disappear. His eyes widened and then rolled into the back of his head as he was hit with an overload of information. He fell backward, unconscious. Ouch! He muttered in his sleep. Hours passed and Ino went to where he was training to find him unconscious in the middle of the field. Naruto! She yelled and she ran to his side, sighing in relief when she found that he was just unconscious. You baka! She muttered and she propped him up, basically dragging him back to their abode. She threw him onto the couch and went to bed herself. Naruto turned over to get comfortable and she slipped blissfully. The night flew by quickly and Naruto awoke the next morning to Ino shaking him awake. Geez baka, you are really hard to wake up. Naruto sighed and scratched the back of his head sheepishly. I trained really hard yesterday. She nodded. I can tell. He sat up, ignoring the headache he had, and he got ready for the day, leaving to the academy with her. He sat next to her in their normal spots, girls crowding around them now. Naruto found it annoying. Sasuke smirked at him, having finally gotten some of his fangirls to leave him alone. Stupid Tem, Naruto muttered and Ino frowned at him. What's the matter? Naruto shrugged. He just pisses me off, I hope I'm not on his team. Ino sighed. Well, whatever happens I want to be on Shika, Choji, Sasuke's, or your team. Naruto nodded. I wouldn't mind Shikamaru or Choji, I don't like the Tem, but I have to admit that it would be better having him on my team than Kiba. Plus it would add to the dynamic of the team without parents. He said with a small smile at his little joke. She frowned as she thought about that. You know, I still like Sasuke, Naruto, just not as much as I used to because I used to see him impenetrable, but now that has happened to my clan, I can't help but feel like he isn't that mentally strong. Naruto nodded with a grin, grabbing her hand suddenly, surprising her and causing a blush to spread across her cheeks. What are you doing baka? She yelled. Ino. He said seriously. I'm here for you, he said and he grinned. Remember that. Okay. Ino nodded slowly, unsure of what to say, her words were caught in her throat anyway. She then smirked, however, a playful look in her eyes. If you keep saying stuff like that baka, I might fall for you. His grin widened. I'm looking forward to it. Her eyes widened. You baka, she muttered and she turned away with a heavy blush. Okay class, shut up. Your graduation is in 2 days, act like it. I basically just have some last-minute pointers today. Since you have the day off tomorrow to prepare, I figured that I would say a proper goodbye to each of you. Naruto's grin seemed to lighten the room at his favorite teacher talking. The day went by rather quickly, just chatting with the teacher. Naruto and Ino left after to go get something to eat for lunch, as they hadn't brought one. Naruto took her to Ichiraku, Ino was hesitant to break her diet, but Naruto seemed to know exactly how to help her with this. Oh, I dunno Naruto, I'm on a die, he interrupted her with a grin and a clap. She frowned at him and raised an eyebrow. He put his hand on her head childishly and her cheeks turned red with frustration. Why you baka? She yelled and she swung at him. He could see it in slow motion and he could have easily dodged, but he had a point to make. The fist impacted into his cheek, pushing his head back a bit. She had put all of her strength into it, which was why she was surprised when he shrugged off her punch and began talking. Ino, that punch was a demonstration of what you are capable of with the diet active, now watch. Naruto said and he turned, punching a wall. It cracked. See. Think about it this way. Eat right and train. If you train hard enough, it won't matter what you eat. Right. She nodded. Now, either way it wouldn't matter to me. Ino is Ino. No matter how big or small, I'd love her either way. He said and he turned around with his hands in his pockets. Now let's go. He said and she followed him into the ramen stand. Naruto ordering 10 bowls and Ino ordering 1. Naruto. Ayame screamed at him and she hugged the younger boy to her chest. Naruto felt his breath leave him at the strength of the hug. Where have you been? Naruto grinned as she pulled back. Just getting used to the new living situation, plus she's been forcing me to eat healthier. Ayame nodded. Okay. She then turned to Ino with a smirk. Kicking your boyfriend into shape. Ino almost spat out her mouthful of noodles and her face flushed red. Naruto went to tell Ayame that they were just friends, but Ino nodded hastily. Naruto gave her a confused look but shrugged. Yeah, she really has been working me to the bone. I'm always sore now, I love it. Ayame blushed and Ino almost passed out. Yeah, the reps she has me do, taking off my shirt, making me sit up. Ino felt a bit of blood come out of her nose and Ayame turned away with a heavy blush on her face. It's torture. She always watches me but never joins in. Naruto, shut up. Ino yelled and Naruto smirked at her. What are you going to do about it? Make it harder. Ino growled at him and he turned back to Ayame, who was a mess. Where's Tsuki, by the way? Naruto asked and Ayame recovered quickly. He went to meet the ambassador to get the ingredients. Now that I think about it, he seems to be a little later than usual. Say, could you do me a favor and go check on him? He should be on his way back or outside the gate where he meets the ambassador. Naruto nodded. Yeah, come on Ino, he yelled. Noticing she was done finally, he had finished his noodles before the competition had started. She followed him toward the gate of the village. He had assumed that it was the main gate. He realized that Tsuki was nowhere to be seen. Naruto frowned and narrowed his eyes, looking around. He sniffed the air and his eyes widened. He ran to the side and picked up a chef's hat, more importantly, Tsuki's hat. Naruto growled as he spotted footsteps through the nearby woods and he sped off with Ino barely able to keep up with him. Naruto landed on a tree branch with Ino landing next to him 4 seconds later. He looked down and there was a large carriage. Outside the carriage was a group of genin, rock genin. Naruto frowned. Genin this far out? Did that mean that they were on a C-rank mission? Maybe, but that also meant that there was a Jonin around too, right? Naruto's eyes widened and he turned, grabbing Ino by the waist and jumped back. Through the stood a man with a kunai in his hand and a brown vest. He was the Jonin. Naruto, what's going on? Ino yelled and Naruto growled. He is on a mission with his team to abduct Tsuki. Naruto deducted. Why though? Why would they want to? Naruto withdrew a kunai of his own, surprising Ino. You aren't even a genin boy, leave right now and I'll spare you too. Naruto glared at him and whispered. Ino, go alert Hokage-sama. Ino slowly nodded and Naruto glared darker at the man. Naruto dashed at him and the man jumped back. Wait. He yelled and Naruto went to stab him but he spun around the slash. Come on kid, there are 4 of us and only, you. The Jonin looked around. Ino was gone. His eyes widened. You 3, go after the girl. Naruto's glare deepened. They weren't that far from the village but Ino wasn't very fast. Why are you abducting old man Tsuki? Naruto yelled at him and the Jonin glared back. Because, old man Tsuki, is a missing nin of Iwagakure. Naruto's eyes widened but he glared again. He didn't know much about the elderly man but he knew that it was very possible with the speed of the elderly man, the rate at which he could make ramen was off the charts. Okay. So now we have to fight, right? The man disappeared, reappearing behind Naruto to answer his question. Naruto turned around and his eyes widened. The older shinobi now had a blade that looked similar to a katana but thicker in his hands. Naruto raised his kunai but the downward swing was much too powerful for his younger arms to handle. He was thrown back, his feet coming off the ground and allowing himself to roll on his back. Whoa, he muttered and Naruto's eyes widened when he was surrounded by a large dome made of earth. He felt his chakra begin to slip away. He frowned and punched the roof with all the force he could muster, effectively cracking it but not destroying it. He pulled back his hand, wincing, his knuckles were bloody and torn. Naruto growled and punched it again, effectively making a hole before kicking it in the same spot, letting himself out. He landed on top, breathing heavy. He stared at the Jonin who shrugged and appeared beside Naruto, swinging at him with his sword but Naruto leaned back, allowing it to pass by in front of him before effectively kicking the Jonin in the gut, sending him sliding back on his feet, off of the dome. Naruto crossed him fingers. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Naruto yelled and the area was filled with 100 of himself that all jumped down toward the Jonin but he weaved through hand seals. Earth Style. Earth Wall. Naruto's clones impacted with the top of a newly formed wall but Naruto used his new speed to appear behind the Jonin, stabbing at him with the kunai. Naruto effectively stabbed him and the man groaned in pain before crumbling to dust. Naruto's eyes widened and he jumped back as a hail of rock shuriken flew at him. Naruto grabbed a branch with his hands and he pulled himself up, jumping off toward another tree. The Jonin met him halfway and punched Naruto in the gut. Naruto coughed up blood and he flew back. He had a new large black bruise on his chest. The Jonin's fist was covered in rock. Naruto impacted to the same previous tree bending around the branch, falling toward the ground, he impacted with an oof. Naruto rolled to his feet, avoiding a kunai and he jumped at the Jonin with a kunai of his own. The Jonin grabbed him by the wrist and bent his arm awkwardly behind his back. Naruto groaned in pain and his face hit the floor. Sorry kid, you show a lot of talent but you are years too early to be fighting Jonin like myself. This is your last chance to flee or I will take your life. Naruto glared at him. Never. I will never turn my back on a friend. The man sighed and he raised his fist. He brought it down toward Naruto's face but his eyes widened when his genin came back into the clearing, carrying an unconscious Ino. Ino. Naruto yelled and the man grinned at his genin. Good job guys. The one carrying Ino walked over to their sensei and dropped the body onto a patch of grass. He then turned to his sensei and a swift motion, stabbed the man in the stomach with a kunai. Naruto's eyes widened and he realized something. Ino had taken over the boy's body. Shay. What the hell? Why did you stab me? He asked and he stumbled back, falling onto his back, blood leaking out of his mouth. Naruto grinned and he stood. Might as well return to your body Ino. He said and she nodded. She felt bad for stabbing somebody, and to trick him with somebody he cared about was messed up but she was a kunoichi, potentially, death and deception were part of her job. Future job. Ino released her jutsu and the boy she was controlling collapsed. Naruto stomped on his head, making sure he was out cold. He then turned to the now guarded genin and he unsheathed a kunai with a wince. His chest hurt but he was sure he could take these two on. The first one rushed at him with a kunai in hand, throwing a shuriken to distract Naruto. Naruto under a horizontal slash and Naruto spun, sweeping the kid's legs out from underneath him. Naruto didn't have any form of fighting but the instinct to fight was built inside of him, burning, letting him know what to do. Naruto swept the boy's legs and the other one jumped down at Naruto. Naruto was a bit caught off guard but he moved back a bit and stopped a hand with his forearm. Naruto felt the ground soften under him and saw that the other one was using a jutsu to soften the ground to the point to allow his feet to sink in but Naruto rolled back, not putting any force on the soft ground. He kicked up, placing a kick under one of their chins before spinning and under a kunai stab before lurching up, uppercutting the other under his chin. The one he uppercutted flew through the air, landing on his head and falling unconscious, while the one Naruto kicked managed to get a blow off on Naruto, which was a stab to Naruto's shoulder. Naruto groaned in pain and punched the boy in the face. The boy stumbled back before rushing back in and kneeing Naruto in the gut, causing him to hunch over. Naruto was then thrown back by a volley of punches. The genin went to continue his assault, but he found himself unable to do so. His eyes widened and Naruto grinned. Ino was breathing heavy with her hands in front of her, but she was holding her hands in a Nara clan seal. Apparently, because of her close relationship with the Nara clan, she knew the shadow possession jutsu. She was by no means good at it and it took almost all of her chakra to do, but she had pulled it off nonetheless. She sighed as Naruto punched him in the side of the head, rendering him unconscious. That was awesome, Ino, Naruto yelled, and he turned his attention to the carriage. The door opened to reveal a short man with black hair. What the? Naruto had moved lightning fast. This was the client. He appeared behind the man and kicked him in the back of the head. The man fell unconscious and Naruto looked into the carriage. Good, he muttered. Tsuki was just unconscious. Okay, Ino, let's get him to the tower. Ino nodded and she went to help the man up, but Naruto's eyes widened. They were surrounded by Anbu and the Hokage himself. Old man? Naruto asked, and the elderly man smiled at him. Yes, Naruto, it's me. Naruto grinned. Did you see me through the crystal ball? Was I awesome? The Hokage nodded. You were amazing, Naruto. I shall take over from here. I'll have an Anbu take you to the hospital so that you can receive medical care. Naruto nodded. Neko, take them. An Anbu with long purple hair nodded and grabbed each of their hands, shunshining. They were almost instantly at the hospital. Take care of yourselves from now on. Nurse, help these two, Hokage's orders. The Anbu said, and they nodded. The nurse came and led them to a room where Naruto would begin to heal and Ino would be replenished on chakra slightly. Naruto grinned at the nurse as she began to heal him. He was glad that he had taken off his jacket at Ichiraku and forgot to bring it, or else it would be ruined. So do you only work here on Tuesdays? He asked, and she shook her head. No, I work almost every day. Naruto frowned. Really? I'm here a lot and I haven't seen you before. She shrugged. I may just not be your assigned nurse. Naruto nodded. She was healing him much faster than anyone had before. Wow, that's healing fast, he said, and she nodded. Medical ninjutsu helps a lot. Ino looked at her and blushed. Could you teach me some? Ino asked, looking away, and the nurse grinned. Of course. Ino grinned as well and resisted the urge to cheer. You should both be fine by graduation. Take tomorrow off and, she looked at Ino. Ino. She nodded. Ino, come here whenever you get the chance after graduation. Ino nodded hastily. Okay. Well, now you are free to go and rest up for the exams, good luck. They nodded. Narses Ino formation. Naruto gasped as he woke up. Today is the day. Naruto grinned and got ready for the day. He made a small breakfast for him and Ino so that they weren't starving all day. Naruto grabbed her by the forearm carefully and they ran out of the building. Come on, he yelled. They were graduating, he wanted to be there with plenty of time to spare. Naruto, Ino yelled as he grabbed her and picked her up bridal style, jumping rooftop to rooftop. He landed in front of the academy with Ino and set her down. She went to punch him, but he was already running in front of her, toward the door. She just sighed and walked after him. Naruto charged into the class. I'm here, believe it, he yelled, and Sasuke snickered at him while Kiba just laughed loudly. Shut up, Tem. Dog boy, Naruto yelled, and Sakura giggled. Naruto made his way to the back where he usually sat, but he didn't sit down as it was absolutely surrounded by girls. He turned and spotted an empty seat. He gained a devious look in his eyes and he sat by Sasuke. Sasuke's eyes widened as they were swarmed by fangirls. No. Sasuke yelled and Naruto laughed. Take that, Tem. He yelled and he received a sudden punch to the back of his head from Ino. His face hit the desk and Sasuke snickered at him. His face then hit the desk too, much to the surprise of everybody in the class. You are both morons. Ino yelled and Naruto began to laugh. Sasuke looked at her like she had grown a second head. He just relented and turned to the front of the class, awaiting their Chunin teacher. Okay. He heard and Iruka came in. We will begin immediately. Starting in reverse alphabetical order. Ino's eyes widened. Ino Yamanaka. Ino stood up and walked out of the room, into the testing room. Do the clone jutsu please, 3 clones. Ino nodded and did as she was told with a burst of chakra. Congratulations Ms. Yamanaka, you pass. Ino grinned and took her headband, running back into the class. Haha, she yelled, holding it up. Next up, Naruto Uzumaki. Her eyes widened when Naruto got up with a bored expression. He made his way out of the room before coming back in a minute later with his headband around his forehead and a large grin. All right, he yelled. Orientation is tomorrow, he said as he sat down and Ino nodded. Yeah, I wonder who will end up on my team. Naruto shrugged. I have a sinking feeling that the Tem is going to be on my team. Ino frowned at him. Why? He shrugged again. Because I'm dead last and he is number 1. Naruto said and her eyes widened. That made sense. Good point. In that case, Naruto patted her head. I dunno Ino, you are the second best of the girls in the class, second to Hinata but she's a Hyuga so you can't really get mad about that. Ino nodded. I guess. The rest of the names were called and Naruto saw that literally everyone in their class had passed. After school Naruto and Ino went out to eat, getting some barbecue. What do you want to do today? Ino asked after they finished eating. I actually wanted to train a bit. Ino nodded. She needed to start training. Okay, maybe I could join you this time. Naruto nodded with a grin. I'd like that. They left toward the training ground. Naruto decided that it would be a good to get in a small spar before they trained, as to know where Ino's abilities were at in terms of skill and power. Okay Ino, you take the first move. Naruto said, getting into a position where he could dodge her attacks or send them back. I didn't know you had a style Naruto. Naruto shook his head. I don't, this is just a basic stance to return blows. Ino nodded and got into her stance. Hers was an altered version of the academy stance to make her blows quicker and more precise. It made up for her general lack of power. Naruto grinned and she ran at him. She threw a quick jab that he caught and pushed her hand back, making her stumble back a bit. Come at me with the intent to kill Ino. He said with a hardened look and she nodded. She punched harder this time and he dodged by slipping his head to the side. She then came back with an elbow to the back of his head which, albeit surprised him, was easy for him to dodge. He leaned forward and, making her lose her balance and he grabbed her ankle, pulling. She fell on her back with a sharp breath. Okay, well I can say that you are easily much better than Sakura. When it comes to taijutsu, Hinata has you beat but she has me beat in terms of raw talent for it as well. She nodded. Now we see how accurate you are. He said and he tossed her a kunai to which she caught it and he pointed at a tree. Throw it mid-center. Ino nodded and threw it. The kunai drifted to the right slightly and Naruto nodded. I can see what the problem is. You are focusing too much on the throw and locking your elbow to throw it. You need to throw it in one fluid motion. He demonstrated, hitting the mid-center of the tree. Do you know any ninjutsu? Ino tapped her chin for a moment. Well you know that I already know the shadow possession, I also know expansion jutsu, I know my, clan jutsu, which is mind transfer jutsu. I also know a basic splash water jutsu. Naruto nodded. That's really good, I guess the good relationship with Nara and Akamichi really come in handy huh? She nodded with a smirk. Yeah, I could totally kick Forehead's ass. Naruto grinned at her enthusiasm. Have you worked on your chakra capacity at all? She nodded. A little bit. Why? Because I kind of want to teach you the shadow clone jutsu, it's just that they take a lot of chakra to make at least 4. She frowned. Shadow clone. What's that? He crossed his fingers and a single clone popped into existence. This one is solid and you gain the knowledge, experience back after you kill it. Ino nodded, a little caught off guard by his ability to create shadow clones. I just showed you the hand sign, but it requires a lot of chakra, so try it. Pour as much chakra as you can muster into it. She nodded and crossed her fingers. Shadow clone jutsu. She yelled and two of herself popped into existence. Naruto smirked. How much chakra do you have left? She frowned and closed her eyes. Enough to make a couple more. He nodded. Well, let's start them on some chakra control exercises. You and I will be working physically. She nodded. The next 4 hours were dedicated to training. Naruto pushed her to her limits on every exercise he had her do. He even suggested that they get weights. She agreed with him, albeit not being naturally strong. Ino knew that with right amount of hard work, anything was possible. After the training session, Naruto took her to the store where he usually bought any ninja supplies that they would sell him. They both got a set of chakra weights. Thankfully they were allowed for civilians. Naruto was in a great mood and Ino was physically beat. Naruto helped her a bit to get home, assuring her that it would be much better after the first couple of sessions. Ino immediately laid down, and Naruto took it upon himself to make something for them to eat. He made a small dinner and they ate before doing their nightly routine and going to bed. The next morning, the day of orientation, Naruto sprung off of the couch with a grin and his eyes widened. The smell of breakfast hit his nostrils. Yo, what's cookin'? He asked, fishing his clothes out of the bag next to him. Just some eggs and bacon. You want pancakes? Naruto smirked. Wife material. He yelled, and unknown to him, her face turned the shade of a tomato. I would love some. She nodded silently. Naruto went into the shower and got dressed afterward. He walked into the kitchen and his eyes widened. She looked awful. Hey, are you okay? You look like you didn't get any sleep last night. He said, and she shook her head. No, Naruto, I keep having nightmares about my family, about what the guy said. He said that Lord Orochimaru wanted my family dead. Naruto frowned. Lord Orochimaru, huh? Like the snake Sannin Orochimaru? She nodded. That man was said to be a genius, so if he did that he must have done it for a benefit. He tapped his chin. What could he possibly gain from that? She asked, and Naruto looked down. I dunno, Ino. She looked down too but put up a small smile afterward. Hey, let's eat, okay? He nodded and gave a heartwarming grin. Of course. Naruto sat at the table with her and ate in silence. Ino was already ready for the day, so they departed afterward. Hey, if you want I can carry you, Ino. I know you must be tired. You can get a bit of sleep. We still have time, so I'll take the long way. She seemed to contemplate it for a moment. Okay, Naruto. Naruto got into a kneeling position and let her get on his back, walking afterward. Okay, he muttered, looking around. She fell asleep on his back quickly, leaving him to his thoughts. Naruto walked through the forest that goes from the back of their new house to the academy. She occasionally mumbled something about Sakura having a big forehead or Naruto being a baka, but he thought it was adorable. The forest was calm and serene, relaxing his nerves. He arrived behind the academy after 45 minutes and he let her down after shaking her lightly, waking her up. We're here, Ino, he said, and she nodded, walking with him into the academy slowly. They sat in empty seats that weren't next to each other because there wasn't a set of empty seats for them to sit in. Naruto waited. They were early but not too early. Naruto set his head down in his arms, ready to take a small nap, and he spotted an already sleeping Ino. He sat up and sighed, smiling at her peaceful face. He waited for a while and just listened to others talk, not even bothering to listen into their conversations. Soon Iruka walked in and Naruto pegged the back of Ino's head with a paper ball, waking her up with a groan and a glare at Naruto, to which he grinned at. Okay, so starting from the bottom, he said, going through teams 1 to 6. Naruto was a little surprised that none of the people he knew by name had been called, but then again, the ones that were called were extras. Iruka grinned at the board in his hand and Naruto got a confused look on his face, but when Iruka began speaking, his eyes widened. Team 7. Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto grinned. Finally. Naruto awaited the next name with a constant grin. Sasuke Uchiha. Naruto's grin immediately faded, but it was replaced by a knowing smile. He knew that Sasuke was an excellent ninja, and if he got friendly with Sasuke, they could make a great team. After some serious consideration and a favor from Kakashi Hatake, which is your Jonin, we have decided to place Ino Yamanaka on your team. Naruto's eyes widened to dinner plates and the grin returned to his face. Ino felt Sakura glaring at her back and she smirked. She was happy to outdo, forehead, billboard brow. Yada. Naruto yelled and Ino grinned. Sasuke looked back at him with a curious look and a sigh. I know the Dobi is stronger than he lets on, and I have a feeling that these two train together. I think that I actually got the good end of the deal, despite his intolerable personality and attitude. Sasuke thought, and Naruto even grinned at him. Sasuke nodded at him and they rearranged the seats so that Team 7 could sit together. Team 8. Naruto looked at Iruka, Hinata Hyuga, Choji Akamichi, Shino Aburame. Naruto grinned, so they completely dissolved. Inoshikacho. Hinata was a good sensor and taijutsu specialist, so she could be great for close combat. Shino was tactful and observant, constantly surprising Naruto. Choji was a great friend and a potentially great teammate. He was physically powerful and he could cover their small amount of weaknesses. Team 9 is already active, he said, and Naruto nodded to himself. Team 10, Shikamaru Nara, Sakura Haruno, Kiba Inuzuka. Naruto nodded, a genius when it came to strategy, a great trap specialist, and a powerhouse that was pretty well thought out, plus Kiba made a good sensor with his dog-like senses. Naruto just tuned out the rest of the teams as they were all extras. The day went by quickly. Now Naruto, Ino, and Sasuke sat in the classroom, being the last ones there, awaiting their Jonin sensei. Naruto was leaned back in his chair, deep in thought, and Ino was asleep. Sasuke just sat there with his chin resting on his folded hands. They had been there for 2 hours after everybody else, allowing Ino to get a minimum of 7 hours sleep. After all of the teams were assigned, they had taken pictures one at a time, taking 3 hours to finish, allowing Ino the much-needed sleep. Naruto's eyes widened and he sat up as distant footsteps caught his ears. The door slid open, revealing a man with spiky silver hair. Yo, was all he said, and Naruto grinned. Yo, he said back, and Sasuke just nodded with his head. Naruto tapped Ino on the shoulder and her eyes widened at the sight of their sensei. My first impression, I don't mind you. Naruto nodded and Ino grinned. Sasuke just smirked and Kakashi turned around. While I don't particularly mind the classroom, I feel like the rooftop is a much better place to talk. Meet me there in 5 minutes. He said, and they nodded. Kakashi disappeared in a puff of smoke and Naruto looked at Ino and Sasuke, shrugging. He got up, already walking out. Ino and Sasuke followed after him and they made it to the roof with 3 minutes to spare. Over here. They heard Kakashi's voice at the edge of the building and they made their way to him. Any idea why I brought you here? Kakashi asked and Naruto raised his hand. A better view. Kakashi shook his head. While that is part of it, I want to make things clear and share a bit about myself with you. Naruto nodded, as did the other two. Sit down, I will introduce myself and you follow my lead. They did as they were told. My name is Kakashi Hatake, I am 26 years old, don't quote me on that. I myself was a part of Team 7 when I was younger, my sensei was none other than Lord Fourth himself. Naruto's eyes widened and heard Ino mutter a, wow. Kakashi continued, I enjoy reading and sparring with my rival, which while a bit over the top, is a nice guy. I dislike those who abandon their comrades, and while I don't have any particular goals at the moment, I live by the saying. Those that disobey orders are scum, but those who abandon their allies are worse than scum. Naruto nodded. I guess I'll go next. He said and he readjusted his headband before beginning. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, I enjoy ramen. Ino grunted at that. I enjoy the company of my friends. Kakashi nodded. I like to study seals in my free time, and I train on a constant basis. He said and Ino nodded, as if confirming that. I dislike those that take what they have for granted and talk about things they know nothing about. I hate people who have no sympathy for others, and I hate those that don't support their comrades. Kakashi smirked under his mask. I'm currently 12 years old, turning 13 soon. Kakashi frowned under his mask at that. He knew how much the boy was mistreated on his birthday. I have two solid beliefs. The first one is that I will never go back on my word, the second is that I never give up. When I'm knocked down, unless I'm dead or unconscious, unless you break every bone in my body, I will stand up again. Sasuke even smiled at that one. And my goal is to be the greatest Hokage, surpassing all of those that came before me. Kakashi grinned under his mask and gave Naruto an eye smile. Next, Yamanaka. Ino nodded and took a deep breath, thinking about what to say for a second. My name is Ino Yamanaka. I am 12, actually just 2.5 weeks younger than Blondie. Naruto grinned. I like flowers, spending time with my friends, and training to become a great kunoichi. Kakashi nodded. I dislike those that have barely if any regard for those that care about them, traitors, idiots, although there is one exception to that, loud people, again I have an exception, and bright colors, man, she muttered the last part and Naruto snickered. I live by the saying that Naruto has imprinted into my head over the last, whatever, which is that I never go back on my word. As for my goals for the future, she tapped her chin for a moment. I have two. I want to be a great kunoichi, to surpass even Tsunade of the Sannin, and I want the opportunity to train a child of my own one day to inherit my ideals and abilities. Kakashi grinned under his mask again. His students were promising so far. Your last Uchiha. Sasuke nodded offhandedly. My name is Sasuke Uchiha, I'm 13. Kakashi nodded and Sasuke continued. I like two things. The first is tomatoes, the second is silence. Kakashi wanted to laugh at the boy but he bit his tongue. I hate a lot of things and I would like to destroy a number of them. His mind drifted to a pink-haired fangirl and he shuddered. My saying is that I will push myself beyond my limits at all times. Kakashi shook his head with a small smile. My goal isn't a goal, but an inevitability. I will without a doubt murder my brother. Kakashi nodded. And I will restore the Uchiha clan. Kakashi sighed and he turned, looking at the monument. Tomorrow, I would like for you guys to meet me at Training Ground 7, come at 5 a.m. I wouldn't eat breakfast, unless you want to barf it up. He said. Also, if I were you, I would discuss your strengths and weaknesses with your teammates. They all nodded and Kakashi disappeared in a puff of smoke. So I guess that I'll start, Naruto said and he turned to the other two. With my clones I have a wide variety of strategies that I could use, from an all-out attack to a barrage of shuriken, or a trap. My genjutsu is okay, but not great enough to use against a jonin yet. My accuracy is easily excellent, my taijutsu, if you could call it that, is okay when it comes to reaction speed but it lacks any form. I know a mid-level wind jutsu which is, air bullet, and I can use it pretty efficiently. I have power behind my punches and I've been looking into kenjutsu or swordplay. I'm a bit slow but I'm working on that with Ino, I bought weights yesterday. Sasuke absorbed the information and nodded. I have great form in taijutsu, my reaction speed is fast but I lack the power to follow through with it, my punches have a shortage of power which, while is useful in the academy where it doesn't matter, may be ineffective against other shinobi. My genjutsu is lackluster and my ninjutsu is great. I know 3 fire jutsu, being, fireball jutsu, phoenix flower jutsu, and, dragon flame jutsu, however the last one takes a massive amount of my chakra reserve. Naruto and Ino nodded. I have decent taijutsu and I am fast but my punches lack power. I am pretty good at genjutsu and I know a couple. I have the basic academy jutsu, the shadow possession, mind transfer, expansion, and shadow clones. I also know a basic soaking jutsu, called water jutsu. I have an above average chakra reserve because I have trained to increase it before. I am working on my speed and power with Naruto. With all of their strengths and weaknesses out of the way, they decided to head home. Naruto wanted to make a quick stop beforehand though and Ino decided to go with him. They ended up at the store where he could buy ninja equipment. He ended up getting some ninja plated gloves similar to Kakashi's only they were a dark red. He swapped his orange short-sleeve jacket with a deep red one that had a black Konoha swirl on the back. His pants remained the black shinobi ones with his weapon pouch on his side, and he got some black shinobi sandals to match. He also decided to buy a couple of scrolls and a sheathed ninja sword that he would have to train with before using it properly. Ino decided to change up her look as well, to fit a more shinobi-like style. She got a black jacket similar to Naruto's and decided on a gray ninja shirt to go under. She covered her bottom half with gray kunoichi pants and decided on black shinobi sandals. After some thought, she had her headband modified to go around her waist as a belt. She ended up getting some gray plated gloves like Naruto's, and they went home, glad that they had inheritance. Naruto and Ino put the weights on their wrists and ankles, channeling chakra into them until they could barely walk up the stairs. Then they made their way to the training ground to see if they could get used to it. They trained for a long time, 6 hours this time. Ino seemed to have a new determination that Naruto assumed came with being a ninja. When they returned home, Naruto made some fish and they went to bed. Next morning, Naruto woke up with the blurring of his alarm, going into the kitchen to get some food, not heeding Kakashi's words. Ino joined him a moment later and they had a normal breakfast, taking turns in the shower. Naruto got dressed in his new outfit and Ino did as well. They made their way to the training ground with a couple minutes to spare. Sasuke was already there. "Yo Tem," Naruto said, and Sasuke groaned. "What, Dobi?" Naruto grinned. "I was just curious if you figured out what we were doing here." Sasuke shook his head and Naruto shrugged, sitting down, ready to get some sleep because their sensei was probably going to be late. 3 hours passed before Kakashi landed in the clearing. "Yo," was all he said, and Naruto grinned at him. Sasuke glared and Ino gave him a nonchalant look. "So, today I have gathered you all here for an official test, you see. That little genin test was only to ward out the complete morons, with no potential to be a ninja." Naruto frowned but nodded. "You are going to get these bells." He held them up. "Anything it permitted and those with a bell would be taken in as my pupil." Naruto glared. "But there's only 2 of them." Kakashi nodded. "That means that one of you will be sent back to the academy." "Bullshit," Naruto yelled and Kakashi sighed. "You have until noon. Begin." The 3 of them jumped away, leaving Kakashi to wonder who was going to attack first. Naruto, Sasuke, and Ino sat in a tree next to each other whispering. "This doesn't make any sense," Naruto muttered, and Ino agreed with him. "It's almost like he is pitting us against each other, but why would he do that?" Ino asked aloud, and Sasuke seemed deep in thought. "If I don't get a bell, I might not ever be able to kill Itachi. If he's pitting us against each other, then why did he give us that bogus speech yesterday about never abandoning your allies?" Naruto questioned in his mind, racking his brain, but then his eyes widened and a grin spread across his face. "I figured it out," he said, and he pulled out a kunai. "He wants us to use teamwork to get the bells. If we work together to get the bells, then technically we all got the bells, right?" Ino's eyes widened. "That makes sense, but what's the plan?" she asked, and Naruto looked at Sasuke. "Come on, Tem, you're supposed to be smart, come up with a plan." Sasuke nodded, not caring about the insult. He began to think, closing his eyes, taking in the layout of the battlefield. "Naruto, you said that you could create lots of clones, right?" Naruto nodded. "Well, then here's what we do." Kakashi stood in the middle of the clearing with a blank look on his face. He looked around, spotting 2 of them rather easily. He couldn't spot Naruto, however. "Yo," Naruto said, and Kakashi's eyes widened. Naruto stood behind him with 2 bells in his hand. Kakashi's turned into saucers. "What? How?" Naruto grinned and tossed them to him. Kakashi reached to catch them, but they burst into smoke and Kakashi was tackled by 2 clones. Kakashi smirked and he went to throw the clones off, but he found himself only able to dodge a fireball storm that headed toward him. He managed to avoid the jutsu and he turned, catching Naruto's fist. Naruto smirked and Kakashi turned around, kicking a Naruto in the face. The Naruto burst into smoke and Kakashi turned back to the original, punching him in the stomach, only for him to burst into smoke as well, replaced with a log that had explosive tags on it. Kakashi jumped back and the explosion erupted. Kakashi went to turn around and intercept Naruto, managing to catch a sloppy kick but it pushed him back. Kakashi pushed his leg back and threw a roundhouse kick that connected with Naruto's abdomen, sending him back. Kakashi dodged a volley of shuriken that came from the tree line and he spun, sweeping Sasuke's legs out from under him. Kakashi then bent his arm around his back, pinning him to the floor with a kunai to his neck. What will you do now, Naruto? There are many situations like this when you are in a battle with enemy ninja, how would you respond to it? Naruto just smirked and pointed behind Kakashi but Kakashi couldn't turn his head to look. He was stuck in a shadow possession jutsu, courtesy of a silent and heavy breathing Ino. Kakashi cursed himself for dropping his guard and praised his genin for their teamwork. Kakashi was forced to reach down and grab the bells before throwing them to Naruto. Naruto caught them and they grinned at Kakashi who frowned, not liking the fact that he was beaten. We win, sensei. We figured out that the goal was teamwork and we decided to attack you as a team, as a matter of fact. The Sasuke under Kakashi turned into Naruto before bursting into smoke, letting Kakashi fall a bit. Sasuke came out of the treeline with a smirk. Well, congratulations, but who gets the bells? Naruto grinned. Well, technically all three of us do because we worked together to get them. Kakashi nodded with an eye smile. Good job, guys, he said and he walked over to Naruto. You all pass. Naruto cheered. All right, Naruto yelled and he pumped his fist into the air. Ino sighed in relief and Sasuke had an ever-present smirk. Who's hungry? Kakashi asked and Naruto raised his hand. Ino followed soon after and Sasuke hesitantly raised his hand. Okay, let's go get some barbecue, my treat. They agreed but before they left, Kakashi set up a small camera and they huddled together, taking a picture. Naruto was in the middle, holding out his fist with a grin and Ino was standing to his left with a smile and her hands behind her head. Sasuke had his hands in his pockets with a small curve of his lips, not looking at the camera. Kakashi was behind them with a hand on Ino's head and a hand on Sasuke's head. His eye smile was blatantly obvious and if you looked closely you could see a bit of a smile behind his mask. After the picture they left to go get food. Naruto and Ino returned to their humble abode at the end of the meal before going to train for another 6 hours. They ended the day on a high note and went to bed, ready for the next day where they would meet Kakashi for their first mission which was most likely going to be more like a chore but a mission nonetheless. It had been 2 months since they had completed the test and they had done at least 50 D-rank missions. Ino found herself growing attached to the team, it was like a new family. Naruto and Sasuke always argued and she loved both of them, one she loved more like a brother and the other she loved in a romantic way. She convinced herself that it was Sasuke but not even she could deny that it was Naruto. Sasuke had become like a brother to her due to the fact that both of their clans were exterminated, conversation came rather easily. Ino still had one family member in the village but he worked for Danzo and she hadn't seen him in a while. Ino was growing more and more attached to Naruto himself as well, asking him where he was going if he was leaving or asking if she could accompany him. He never turned her down, not even once, not even when it was something stupid like going out for air. She knew that he loved her and he would do anything for her, he made that blatantly clear the first month after they got their team. Flashback. Naruto trudged through the streets with his hands in his pockets, he had just increased the weight of his chakra weights and it was weighing him down. He smirked as his shared house with Ino came into view. He walked across, opening the door and walking in. He heard sobbing and his eyes instantly softened, knowing it was Ino crying about her family. He decreased the weight of his chakra weights so that he could be fast and he ran to her door, knocking on it. He heard a gasp and a quick, "See, come in." He knew she would let him comfort her, she always did. Despite Naruto being on the slow side, when it came to being school smarts anyway, he always tried his best to reason with her and pull her out of her slump. Naruto came in, instantly recognizing her tear-stained eyes and disheveled hair. "Hey," he said softly. Ino smiled kindly at him, but he could see the sadness behind the smile. Hey, she muttered, and he sat on the bed next to her. You okay? He asked, already knowing the answer. No, she muttered, and he nodded. Wanna talk about it? Ino sighed. She really didn't. No. He shrugged. Okay, he said, and he laid next to her sitting form, smiling reassuringly and kindly at her. They were just there in silence for a while before Ino spoke up. Naruto, why do you go out of your way to help me? Naruto grinned, and she found a small blush coming to her cheeks. He closed his eyes and laid his hands behind his head. Because I love you, he said, and her eyes widened. But what about forehead? Naruto opened his eyes and looked at the ceiling, raising his hand into his vision. Actually, the only reason I used to pester her for a date when we were younger is because she actually paid attention to me when I talked. It didn't matter that it was negative attention to me, it was attention all the same. Ino remembered how badly Sakura used to reject Naruto, physically and verbally. The village used to treat me like I didn't exist unless it was October 10th, which was worse because they would get into mobs and beat me within an inch of my life because of my tenant. Ino's eyes filled with tears. It was more like the desire for attention. When she would turn me down so loudly, I got attention from everyone in the class. He said, and she nodded. That was true. When Sakura turned him down, he was the main thing that the class would talk about that day. Naruto, Ino muttered, and he grinned at her. It's fine, I wouldn't trade my life for the one that I have, he muttered, lightly grasping her hand. I mean, I met you after all, he said, and she just stared at him for a moment. She unconsciously felt herself leaning in for a kiss, and her mother's face flashed through her mind. No, she yelled, and she jumped out of the bed, away from him. She pulled on her jacket and ran out of the house. Naruto's hurt look present on her mind, her heart aching. She wouldn't let anybody get close to her. It hurt too much. Naruto was a constant reminder of what happened to her family. Naruto wanted to run after her, but all he could do was reach out toward the door with sad eyes. He stood up and made his way out of the building to go blow off some steam. Flashback end. Ino sighed as she made her way to the Hokage Tower. While she had been clingy to Naruto, Naruto seemed mentally distant, as if he was hesitant to share his thoughts with her, like he was scared of her opinion. It hurt her to see her friend be that scared to share his thoughts and feeling with her. He had become more reserved. He had stopped asking her out once a week and instead opted to go to sleep when he got home. Their training was silent and awkward, not really having anything to say to each other. She spotted her team, and as always, Sasuke and Kakashi were conversing while Naruto just sat to the side of them with a blank look on his face. Kakashi had taken notice of his behavior immediately, but he decided that his students needed to handle this on their own. It hadn't affected their teamwork as far as he had known. I have good news, you three. We got a C rank mission. We are escorting a bridge builder to the land of waves. Naruto nodded, and he went to pack for a C rank mission, leaving the three of them to go over the details of the mission. Ino went home and told him when they were meeting, which was the next morning, and Naruto nodded, not offering a word to his teammate. He went into the kitchen and cooked them food before shoveling it down and going to sleep on the couch, leaving her to eat by herself. The next morning they made their way to the village main gate, meeting up with Kakashi, Sasuke, and an elderly drunk named Tazuna, who was a master bridge builder that needed to be escorted home. Tazuna was going to remark about the weak-looking team, but he decided against it when he saw the hidden aggression in Naruto's eyes. Over the time that he had been alive, he learned to read people, and he could tell that Naruto was seeking to crush somebody, to get out his pent-up aggression. They left, and the team, minus Naruto, talked quietly. Naruto took notice of a puddle, on a summer day when it hasn't rained in weeks. He stopped for a moment, walking over to it, staring at it. Really? He asked, and he was answered by a clawed hand shooting up at him. Naruto stepped back, and a man flew out of the puddle and past him. Naruto turned to the man, and his team watched from a distance as Naruto was surrounded by two Chunin-level ninja with claw-like devices on their hands. Naruto had a look on his face that was serious but lacking any concern. Let's go. One of them yelled and both of them rushed at Naruto. Naruto under a claw, grabbing the one that attacked him by the gauntlet on his wrist. Naruto then turned and swept the legs out from under the other one. He fell on his back and Naruto stomped on his face. Bro. The one Naruto was holding yelled. Naruto bent his arm awkwardly behind his back before jerking it painfully, effectively pulling it out of the socket and causing the boy to yell out in pain. Naruto then pushed the back of his head, slamming it into the floor with an audible crack. Okay, Kakashi muttered. I was about to let them attack and see who they were after, but it seems you had another plan. I didn't expect that kind of brutality from you, Naruto. Calm down. He said, noticing the boy was satisfied with his work. That wasn't necessary, Naruto. You could have subdued them with ease. Naruto turned with a sneer toward Kakashi, walking past him. Kakashi sighed and they walked away from the two brothers. Naruto was being even more distant than before, only replying with grunts. He was like Sasuke used to be. Naruto, despite being angry, was keeping a close watch on the stuff around him because it was likely that they were after the bridge builder and that if someone had sent them, that they were likely to send someone stronger next time, likely Jonin level next time. Naruto's ear twitched as he heard silent breathing. He blasted toward the treeline with a kunai drawn and he engaged a boy with a mask in taijutsu. What? Kakashi yelled, he hadn't even sensed him. Get down. Kakashi yelled and the team complied with Sasuke pushing Tazuna down. A massive sword flew over their heads and embedded in a tree. A man landed on it with a glare directed at Kakashi. Kakashi of the Sharingan. The man said. Zabuza, the demon of the hidden mist. Kakashi muttered. He didn't have time to worry about Naruto, he had to deal with Zabuza. Kakashi pulled up his headband, revealing a Sharingan. Oh, I'm flattered. Zabuza said and Kakashi frowned. Naruto. Naruto had caught the masked boy off guard, crashing his fist into his face, making the boy tumbled back into another clearing. That's quite the sensing ability you have. The boy muttered as he stood up. Naruto glared at him. Naruto got into his taijutsu stance, his hands crossed in front of him in claw-like form. Think when Naruto first awakened Kyuubi during his fight with Sasuke. The boy weaved through hand seals. Water style. Raging torrent. A wave of water rose from behind her and rushed toward Naruto, who easily got out of the way with a burst of speed, appearing in the treeline. Naruto blasted toward the boy and he pulled out a Senbon. Naruto punched at him and the boy slipped to the left, spinning, intending to stab him with the Senbon, but Naruto and came up with an uppercut. The boy was thrown back, landing on his back before standing up. He held up one hand. Hidden Jutsu. 1,000 Needles of Death. Naruto was surrounded by 1,000 needles made of ice and before they could connect he jumped into the air, avoiding them and he weaved through hand seals. His cheeks grew large and he roared. Wind style. Air bullet. A large ball of wind shot toward the masked boy and he slipped to the side, avoiding it, but he stumbled a bit as it caused a quake in the ground. Naruto took advantage of this, rushing at him, ready to punch him in the face and remove his mask. The boy surprised Naruto by rolling toward him awkwardly and Naruto tripped over him, landing on his hands and flipping to his feet. Naruto stopped for a moment and stared at the boy who had his hands up with his fingers crossed. I'm sorry. I can't afford to hold back in this fight anymore. The boy said and Naruto nodded. Secret Jutsu. Demonic Crystal Ice Mirrors. Kakashi. Kakashi was kicked in the face by Zabuza and sent soaring over the water. He landed in it, intending to hide in the water, but his eyes widened, feeling the chakra it had in it. Gotcha. Zabuza said. Water style. Water prison jutsu. Kakashi was trapped in a sphere of water that was as solid as steel, unable to move. Sasuke glared at Zabuza and Ino stayed in front of the bridge builder. Tazuna, I need you to go hide in the trees. Ino said and Tazuna nodded, running into the forest. Ino then stood next to Sasuke. Any ideas? Ino asked and Sasuke shook his head. Zabuza held up his hand and a copy of himself formed out of the water. You guys are screwed. Not only are you fighting a Jonin but your friend is fighting Haku, a kid I trained myself. There is no way you are going to be able to beat me. Ino glared at him. Why are you attacking us? She yelled and Zabuza laughed. Well, actually, I was hired to kill the bridge builder. I'm just having some fun before I go to kill him. You see, the land of waves where this man lives is controlled by a very powerful man, money-wise. His name is Gato from Gato Corp. He has an iron grasp on this country and won't let the bridge builder ruin it with the bridge. Ino nodded. It made sense. All we have to do is save Sensei Sasuke. Ino said and Sasuke nodded. Something in mind. Run. They heard Kakashi yelled and Ino shook her head. No, Sensei. We won't leave you behind. We will complete this mission. Kakashi stayed silent after that. Your brats have to do the fighting for you, Kakashi. Kakashi didn't say anything. Whatever. Kill them. He ordered the clone and it rushed at Sasuke, elbowing him in the gut, making him spit up blood before kicking him in the face. Sasuke flew back and the clone raised its sword, blocking a kunai from Ino who jumped at him. Ino sliced at him with a kunai and the clone caught her by the throat. Ino smirked. She burst into smoke and the clone looked to the side. He blocked a punch from Sasuke but the blonde was missing. Sasuke under a kick. He then rolled to the side to avoid a vertical slice. The Zabuza clone spun and put his foot in Sasuke's gut, throwing him into the air. Sasuke threw a kunai at the real Zabuza who just caught it. He smirked at it turned into Ino and he held her by the collar. He headbutted her and she burst into smoke. A shadow clone, where's the re? His eyes widened when Ino burst from the water under him, a kunai stab up. Zabuza jumped back, receiving a shallow cut on his abdomen and Kakashi was set free. Zabuza growled and swung his massive sword at Ino. Ino raised her kunai to black but the man was too strong, pushing through it almost effortlessly but with enough trouble to cause his attack to only leave a large gash on her left arm. She yelled out in pain and Kakashi kicked Zabuza in the gut. Zabuza slid back across the surface of the water. Ino, get back to Sasuke and have him patch that up, then go help Naruto. He yelled and Ino nodded. She rushed back to Sasuke and he wrapped up her arm. Let's go help Naruto. She yelled and he nodded. They ran toward where Naruto was. Naruto. Naruto yelled out in pain. He was impaled by yet another volley of Senbon from all directions. Do you see now? It's futile. Naruto shook his head with a frown. He was beginning to get wobbly. He was hurting and he had lost a lot of blood. He was physically much stronger than the boy but the jutsu the boy was using made that useless as it seemed to increase the boy's speed 200-fold. Naruto growled out and another Senbon hit a vital spot. He fell to his knees. I got this, Naruto muttered before falling on his front, almost asleep. Naruto. He heard and he closed his eyes, drifting into another world. Ino realized that it wasn't smart for both of them to travel into the mirrors and she stayed on the outside, attacking the mirrors that the boy appeared in. Sasuke went on the inside and he was being impaled by volley after volley of Senbon, barely keeping track of the boy's movements. Sasuke jumped in front of Naruto yet again and unleashed a fireball. The boy dodged easily and kicked Sasuke in the chest, sending him at a mirror which the boy appeared in. Sasuke turned around and he could now sense the boy's movement. Haku realized two things. One was that the boy was tracking his movements and he wasn't before, and two that the boy had a one-tomo Sharingan in his eyes. Haku glared at him, narrowly avoiding a punch to the gut before formulating a plan. He sprung at Naruto and as he expected Sasuke toward them but his eyes widened. Sasuke wasn't fast enough but someone else was. Inoo. Sasuke yelled. The Haku collided with Ino, impaling her with a Senbon in a vital area. There was an audible crash noise and Ino grabbed him by his arm. His eyes widened and Ino punched him in the mask. He flew back and stood up. Ino collapsed and that left the Uchiha who he dashed at, catching him off guard and stabbing him in the neck, effectively rendering him unconscious. Haku sighed in relief before he heard a grunt. Ino wasn't completely unconscious either so she heard it as well. What? Naruto muttered, sitting up. He looked around and his eyes widened immensely. Ino. He yelled and he rushed to her side. He could worry about Sasuke later. Naruto. Is that you? Ino asked and he nodded, propping her head up. He held her closely. Her eyes were losing their life and her skin was cold. You'll be okay, he said, and tears began to fall down his face. Naruto, I'm sorry, I should have taken you up on your offers. Naruto's eyes widened. He knew what she was referring to. Don't worry about it. You still can. He yelled and Ino shook her head lightly. Hey, she muttered, putting a hand on his cheek. Be strong, for both of us, okay? Thank you, Naruto. She muttered, not being able to finish her sentence before her body went limp and Naruto's heart shattered, her pulse was gone and she wasn't breathing. No, he muttered silently. Ino, come and wake up, please. He whispered, placing a kiss on her forehead. A voice interrupted him, however. Is this the first time you have had a comrade die? Naruto didn't respond. She rushed into Sa. Shut the hell up. Naruto yelled. Naruto's mind. Kyuubi. Give me your power. He said with a fierce glare. Their chakras were merged successfully, but he could always put more chakra into Naruto. That's not a good idea, Naruto. That would seriously injure your body. I don't care. He yelled, his voice cracking at the end. I refuse. Naruto glared at him, walking forward. I wasn't asking. Naruto yelled. Give me your power. The fox shook its head. Fine. You won't give it to me. Then I'll force it out. Naruto screamed and he went to rip the seal off. The fox's eyes widened. You fool. Naruto went to tear the rest of the seal off, but the back of his collar was caught and he was thrown backward, onto the grassy plain that he had created. The slight splash of the waterfall hit him with droplets on his face. What? Naruto felt himself calm down. The rage was still there, but it felt like he didn't have it right now, like he couldn't grasp that specific feeling. You little baka. He heard and he looked up. He frowned. It was a woman with dark red waist-length hair. Hello. Who are you? Naruto asked and the woman shook her head with a sigh. My name is Kushina Uzumaki.